Broads Media.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome on in to Sports Talk with Broads. Doc Rivers, out of town. I'm not surprised. He wasn't fantastic down the stretch in Game 6. He wasn't very good in Game 7. He was third on my list of problems in Game 7, Joel Embiid and James Harden being the 1 and 2. But I thought it was deserved with the concept of you're changing the direction you're going into. You're looking for a facelift. You're trying something new. You need a new voice. Basketball-wise, looking at the entire year, I don't think Doc did a poor job. I think at times he showed you why he gets the respect around the league. I think he did a lot of solid things. But when you fail to get over the second round hump, then it's basically inevitable. I don't think the Sixers picked James Harden over Doc Rivers. I think it's two separate situations. I don't know where Daryl Morey goes from here with James Harden. And I am worried about a big deal and bringing him back because I just went through the experience of Tobias Harris, which is the guy's getting paid a lot of money, overpaid, which limits what you can do with your roster. So if we get James Harden for multiple years down the road and he's already half fried, what am I going to expect? A limited roster once again. And a very inconsistent James Harden who can pop a 40 burger and get you 45 and win you a game without your MVP on the road to make a statement in a series, but then look like he forgot how to play basketball 2 days later. I can't wrap my head around it. I don't blame the Sixers for doing this. I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, Daryl Morey's name was brought up already. I know that some Sixers fans want him out of town too. I have no problem with Daryl Morey pushing the buttons here. I'm not telling you the leash is forever. If this goes south and the next moves that he makes look pathetic, I'm open to conversation. Right now, though, there's no reason to be screaming for him, in my opinion. As we continue to go up the board of the Sixers front office and the Sixers management. Joshua Harris, David Blitzer. The owner's got to go. You only hate the owners because he bought the Washington Commanders. Every time I question why you want Joshua Harris out of here, it's either he's not a Philly guy or, well, the process, and back in 2014, it's not 2014, it's not 2015, it's not 2016, I don't care. I ask my management and my ownership to do certain things. Number one, spend money. They're willing to go over the luxury. They're willing to fire coaches, eat a ton of cash, and then go out and get another premier coach or high-name, high-profile coach. So they give you the assets to succeed. Malpractice is when I start to get upset with ownership. It may not work out, but if your ownership hires Daryl Morey as your president of basketball operations, and then that ends up being Doc Rivers as your head coach when you go down the line, that's not basketball malpractice. It may not be the right pieces, but I can't blame owners of a team thinking that that could possibly be a twister piece that works. Does that even add up? Twister? I don't think. Probably not. Probably not. That was a horrendous explanation. But seriously, that's not an incompetent move. If that's the case, John Middleton needs to sell the Phillies. Matt Klentak and Andy McPhail was terrible. Then he brings in Dave Dombrowski, and it looks different. Should we let go of John Middleton? Because I haven't seen a World Series championship in a long period of time. No. So that's just nonsense to me as well. The main issue right now is Joel Embiid isn't where we thought he was in big moments. That's what it was. You know, I got friends of mine reaching out all day. What went wrong? What needs to change? Embiid's out of shape. Embiid needs to be in the low block more. If you watch this team play, and if you saw Joel Embiid with his back against the in the post more, back against the basket more, that's not the difference in this team winning a championship. You need Embiid plus more. You need Embiid to grow and attack those moments differently. And I hope to God that that's something you could teach and instill in him with a new coach. Half of me is afraid because I think you either have it or you don't. Just like with the point guard position, either you're a natural born point guard or not. You have that within. Tatum has it. I don't know if Embiid does, but I know he's got the skill level that any NBA player dreams of. So that's the start. But we have to continue to grind. And he needs to continue to go to work and prepare himself mentally to close out games when everything gets tight, or else you have no shot. So what head coach can maybe provide that leadership and that spark? There's a few names, and there's a lot of teams with a head coach opening. So it is a competition right now. Nick Nurse. I think tactically, he can dial up some things that will be creative. Here's what I do know, though. That Doc Rivers got exposed by the opponent going with double bigs. Robert Williams changed this entire series. Brett Brown got canned because Nick Nurse went Marc Gasol, who one-on-one handled Joel Embiid better than anything we've seen in this league. And then Serge Ibaka gets added, and there you go. So I wonder how Daryl Morey is going to approach this offseason, knowing that's now 2 times that's crushed Joel Embiid and this Sixers team from operating with any sort of life. I bring that up because I asked, do they have the options? Now, you could have tried more. Doc does get stuck in his ways. My biggest criticism in general of Doc Rivers is sometimes he gets too stubborn. Now, I thought this year he was more willing to move off of certain things that maybe it would even take longer to do in previous years. Yes, it was horrendous to go to Montrezl Harrell as much as he did throughout the regular season. At some point, though, he acknowledged it's Paul Reed. I think in other years, Montrezl Harrell still goes longer, plays more minutes. Might have even seen him more in the postseason. He's willing, but he's definitely super stubborn. That hurts. So maybe I feel better if I saw some things that maybe I could at least go, okay, it's not working, but Doc is throwing everything out there. He tried every possible, legitimate, reasonable option to try and stick it to Joe Mazzulla for going double big. The other side of that coin, though, and as you can see, this is where I'm playing that balancing beam game because I generally do see both sides with a lot of these issues with the Sixers. I get why there's one extreme to one side, and I get why there's another side to it, even if it's a smaller minority. The majority has the pitchforks rolling, and they want everybody gone. That's why after the game was over, I didn't want to make these big-time statements that this needs to happen. I'm still in the middle of digestion mode, even though I'm starting to get a sense of it. You might not be able to move on from Harden. There's a sign-and trade option. I'm not saying it's impossible, but logically speaking, Embiid's here. We're not shipping Embiid out of town. I am pissed, and I'm very disappointed in him. He didn't show up. And I always thought the Sixers had a chance to win because at any given point, he can carry you to the promised land on that night. And then I found out maybe he can't. Maybe he can't yet, or maybe he can't. I don't know. But his skill level is so high that you have to roll the dice and try again to make him realize what you do throughout 82 games, it is what it is. At this point, you won an MVP and you got to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. You have to do more in the playoffs. And whether he believes in this franchise or not, until he demands a trade and storms into Daryl Morey's office, I'm under the assumption that he's willing to ride it out here until proven otherwise. Nick Nurse would be a fine tactical move. But anyway, I wanted to close my thoughts on the double big thing. If you don't have the option, you don't have the options. But Daryl Morey also inherited some of these contracts. Tobias Harris, you're handed that. Now, maybe you can move it because it's the final year of the deal, so it would be an expiring contract. And then when you think of the depth on the bench, if you can acquire two players, which wouldn't be the ceiling of Tobias Harris, which I think whenever he's off the roster, you'll see some of the things that he does provide, even with the moments of missing layups and poor play. There's a lot of times that he's very important that gets overlooked. It won't be as high of a ceiling, but if you get two reliable players, which they don't have many reliable players, one could be a starter, and then one could be a high option off your bench, a 6-man, a 7-man, probably not a 6-man, but a 7-man, and something like that. Two good players that are real NBA players. How many times do we go to the bench and see a Shake Milton, a Furkan Korkmaz? None of those names. NBA depth playoff players. That's what we need. Daryl Morey inherited Ben Simmons. James Harden may not work. But don't tell me that landing him and getting the opportunity to work with him and Joel Embiid, one guy led the league in scoring, the other led the league in assists, is some tragedy. When Ben Simmons is what it costed. He got rid of Al Horford. He got Seth Curry for Josh Richardson, who stinks. It's a good deal. He gets DeAnthony Melton. It's a nice move. He didn't have a clean slate. He had to work through hell. So you can make the argument based on where you were, even though the end goal is still the same. Get out of the second round. And Brett and Doc ultimately landed in the same spots. But I still stylistically look at Doc Rivers with a different sense of, I thought that was more professional. And I didn't even hate Brett Brown. And he had to deal with someone who didn't shoot a basketball. Reliable with the dribble handoffs. J.J. Redick. It was a completely different style. I think Doc enhanced it. And what we need is a coach to come in here and then implement some of the things that Doc Rivers did well and add to it. So Doc got him going at the nail. Maybe you could go with some at the nail, some post up, some from the three-point land, get more versatile with his ability. So Brett did something super well. Double big stopped him. Doc Rivers added. Double big stopped him. What can the next guy do? Now, Nick Nurse would be a tactical style coach. Monty Williams, I think he's a good emotional leader. I think Monty Williams has a has a personality that's strong. Okay, Nick Sirianni, maybe this is the best way to explain it. I think Nick Sirianni does a beautiful job connecting with the players on a personal basis. You're really invested in the guy. Sports comes after. X and O comes after. I want you to know that I am here for you. I love you, your family. Let's go do this together. Let's ride. Outside looking in, that's where it seems, and Monty Williams was here before, so we did get a taste of who he was as an assistant coach to the best of your ability on what assistant coaches can be, but I think that's where he seems to be at his strengths. Keep in mind, some of these playoff losses, though, are more hideous than Game 7 in Doc Rivers. Some of the playoff failures for Phoenix were really, really tough to see. So Monty Williams, Nick Nurse, Bud. There's a lot of the NBA world that despises Bud. I would be okay if they hired Bud. I'd be okay if they hire any of the names I'm about to mention. They all have strengths, they all have weaknesses. Bud won a championship. It's so funny to me how we can't even get out of the second round, yet we devalue NBA championships. Coaches who have them, who cares? They won it with talent. Okay, give me the long list of NBA coaches that won without talents. I think Eric Spoelstra is one of the best coaches in the NBA. Is that fair to say? Go look at the rosters when he won a championship. Now, he could do more with less than other coaches, but we want to win a championship. He won with Dwayne Wade and Shaq. You ever hear them? He won with LeBron, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade. Have you heard of them? And remember, there was some beef at times with Eric Spoelstra. Now, I think he's doing more than I anticipated with Bam and with Jimmy Butler. And remember, at times they were dealing with the Tyler Hero injury. And that happened early on, I'm saying. He wins it all when he's got that talent. But when guys win championships, we pick and choose when those championships are valid. Winning a championship is very hard to do. Bud got ripped every day. I look at that as a positive. Now, I got mocked for saying that on the air today because Milwaukee isn't the same sports town as Philly. And that's fine. I acknowledge that. I get that. But for him to be in the crosshairs as much as he was, just from a losing your job standpoint, he responded, and it's not easy. It's not easy to go to work every day when the newspaper and sports talk radio and even just the national media coverage wonders, can he do it? Will he win? Should he lose his job? Why aren't they winning the trophy? He put all that behind him. This year, for him to get canned after dealing with the Giannis injury, which, by the way, is why they lost. That matters. Not having Giannis matters. And dealing with a heavy, sad personal story with family and still showed up to work every day and went about his job professionally the way he did. Or he doesn't make adjustments. Won a championship. So he did something right to this whole no adjustment thing. Won championship. Recently. If you're going to knock Doc for it being in 08. Sam Cassell. Never been a head coach before. I used to think that because he was around Doc and seems like a Doc project, that it would be too similar. Joe Girardi and Rob Thompson completely bucked that trend for me. So I don't care anymore. I actually think there's positives in that. He's seen things that worked. He sees things that didn't work firsthand with Joel and with some of these players on the roster. So he somewhat does have a first step forward. He has more of a lead in that area. Never being on the sidelines as the guy he'd lack. But he's very hard on Tyrese Maxey, and there seems to be respect and a response. As a player, everybody respects his career. He's done a lot of great things on the floor when it was his time to put the jersey on and lace up the shoes. So I get it. I don't know if that smells like Daryl Morey's move, but any of those four guys, I think, makes a lot of sense. D'Antoni, I get the eye roll on that name. I'm not in love with it. I wouldn't rule it out completely. I'm not saying no. Truth be told, the roster and Joel Embiid, that's what you need to focus on more than one of these selections. Because all of these selections can do a nice job. The Boston Celtics won Game 7 because Jason Tatum. They didn't win because Joe Mazzulla. They didn't win because Al Horford. They won because their star wasn't going to be denied. They won because that guy took over. That's how you win an NBA championship. Nick Nurse, Kawhi Leonard, that combo? Kawhi Leonard is why the run happened. Nick Nurse then gets fired for how things went afterwards. No more Kyle Lowry, although he's playing on one leg. When the talent left, he looked like a way worse coach. All of these guys will be fine. If Embiid doesn't elevate himself and work on closeout, and he closed games out in the regular season, but double bigs, taking away your personal space, the moment being bigger, all that applies. And if you can't do it there, then it doesn't matter who your coach is. I hope to God that they look in the mirror and recognize that we got our coach fired. Apparently, James Harden and Doc didn't have the best relationship, whatever. That doesn't tell me about Doc Rivers. Because I think Joel Embiid liked Doc Rivers a lot. The dude led the league in scoring 2 years in a row. It's not the same league, though, as MLB, as baseball is. Because when Joe Girardi got fired, the team took it personal. I don't know if in the NBA they're going to take it personal. James Harden probably doesn't even think he did anything wrong, which is a problem. But he's just worried about doing his thing tonight, tomorrow night, the following night. At this point, I think he cares about basketball, but I'm saying he goes, I'm a fantastic player. I'm one of the best ever, and I'll get a shot next year, whether I do a sign and trade, whether I go to Houston. In a perfect world, go get me Dame. I think it's too much of a reach at this time for me to really hold my hat on it. What I think makes, unfortunately, the most logical sense is Harden returns, but not on like a max in 4 years. Not that craziness. But you have Harden, you have Maxey, you have Tucker, you have Embiid. You trade Tobias Harris, and you get a new coach. And maybe you maximize Maxey differently, you play this differently, but that's what I think makes the most sense for me as we sit here on this day. It could change, and it could change quickly. Daryl Morey speaks tomorrow, so we'll hear from him. But let's hear from you. Excuse me. Something stuck in the back there. All right. I want to hear from you. Let's do this.
Look, I think this is, I get it. I get where they're coming from. It's like you had to make this move, I guess, but I think they're pointing their fingers in the complete wrong direction. Doc coached his absolute balls off since at least early March, maybe even a little bit before that. And, you know, the only reason we fell apart the way we did, well, maybe not the only reason, but it was your superstars. Joel Embiid and James Harden did not show up in Game 7. 3 of 11 and 5 of 18 is not going to do it. I don't care what your rotations look like, what your sets are going to be, or anything like that. If your superstars can't make their shots, no game plan you put out there is going to work. It's going to fall flat no matter what. And even Game 6, like, it just didn't work. So you want to talk about his Game 7 chokes. it shouldn't have even gone to a Game 7 because, again, your superstars didn't perform. So, like, I get what's happening, but, I mean, when are we going to learn that the coach is not going to make the difference with this roster? You look around all the really successful teams in this league that have been successful. They've swapped out coaches, but they've remained successful because of their rosters. I'm seeing people talk about Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse, I mean, he won his first year because of Kawhi Leonard.
Okay, I get the premise of what you're saying, and I don't disagree. I feel the same way. With that said, there is about a 10, 15-ish% of what a coach does provide. There is something. It's majority players, and by a long shot, but whatever the percent is that a coach does provide, they need a new one of that. It just doesn't make sense to bring him back. He didn't even do poorly. But Monty Williams, Bud, all these guys, they're good coaches. And sometimes it's just time. Eric Spoelstra and Popovich, they don't grow on trees. They're the outlier. Every other franchise has to start moving it around. But you're right, it does come down to them making their shots. It is pretty wild to think that when they missed all those open looks in Game 6, and actually, I have some of my old notes right here. They shot 23% from three. They didn't make their shots. And when the NBA breaks down their wide open looks, like the amount of spacing from the defender to the shooter, and how they give you those numbers, that was just sickening to look at. I forget it off the top of my head, but we discussed it a bunch on the show. If a few of those just went in, the Anthony Melton, a couple of those shots fall, the entire city is flipped. I know it's not as simple as this, but if a couple wide open looks from NBA players fell wide open, massively wide open, that fall on 3 other nights, if it was their night, we're speaking about Doc and Embiid. Totally different. And the Sixers closed out a game at home. In a Game 6, didn't even need 7 games to beat the Boston Celtics. So it's pretty wild when you put it in that type of light.
Bro, I'm shocked. I'm shocked because the Sixers are treating symptoms and not the actual disease. For half a decade, they have had fundamental issues at the top of the organization, and I'm just afraid that they'll hire Dan Toney or someone like that is a second version of Houston, and we just end up like Houston in the future. But as far as Doc, he was definitely the issue, one of the issues, but we have a lack of leadership. We have a lack of direction within the organization to where we're only drafting centers and power forwards.
Yeah, see, I don't agree with bringing back the Sam Hinkie thing and comparing it to what they're doing right now. They're two completely different identities, and I don't know. I just don't think that that's even relatable at this point. So, the Houston team, when James Harden was with Houston, they were getting to the Western Conference Finals. And by the way, lost to Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors in a drawn-out series. Sometimes you lose sense of context. Going 7 in the Western Conference Finals and losing to one of the biggest dynasties this sport has seen over the last 20 years, we look at that as a failure. Remember, that's what I was saying with coaches and just how we absorb failure and success and what we deem valid and not okay. How far away were you at that point? And we don't want that, but we can't even get out of the second round right now. It's just odd to me. There's legitimacy in what you're saying. Doc was a part of this. He was up 3-2, had a lead in the fourth quarter. Offense went silent, stubborn in some areas. There's absolutely blame to go around. But even looking ahead, we're automatically shutting off things for fake reasons. Doesn't mean that they will absolutely succeed. I don't know if they will or not. But the narrative surrounding some of the possibilities, I think, is hitting an extreme. We'll take another here.
Yo, bro, this is Nate from SP from South Philly, man. Yo, this series destroyed me. These past 3 years have destroyed me as a Sixers fan. I think the only way we're making it out is if we get a hard-nosed vet. Wow, Joel Embiid is on the team. Is if we get a hard-nosed vet coach, because, man, we do have some sucker behind young boys. I'm not sure if Kirsten is allowed, but they really need somebody to get your emotions together so that they can respond to being punched in the nose. Because whenever we get punched in the nose, we lose.
Well, isn't that why they brought in P.J. Tucker? And he brought that, and then he also hit some threes. And he stunk all regular season, but he's going to be a playoff performer for you. I think it's highlighted on what he can do. And it matters, but he also has to make his shots. The fourth quarter, P.J. Tucker, if that's, the game 7, P.J. Tucker, if that's what we can find more, then, it's a huge improvement. It's professional basketball. I don't think you just need to get in their face and scream at you. There's nothing wrong with tough love. It works for Tibbs. The Knicks had a nice season. There's a cap, and that only lasts so long, but they had a nice season. I think Sam Cassell does have an edge to him. It's a different message when you're the head coach compared to the assistant coach. I know in hockey, traditionally, that's more of the player's guy, can lean back. Sam Cassell does seem to have some bite. But these are pro dudes. You can't just get in their grill and start yapping like they're high school guys that are afraid of you, or college guys. That's why I didn't even bring up the Jay Wright name. And I think this is a good spot to wrap things up. Jay Wright's not coming here. I can't automatically think that his style works at the pro game. Brad Stevens struggled. No, he helped build the Boston team that is now, and he's now up in the front office, but he had a very difficult time taming these personalities, and Tatum and Brown, and they had to do something different. They go to Udoka, now Joe Mazzulla. And by the way, Joe Mazzulla, I still don't think he's this wizard. He made a nice move to go to Robert Williams, which panned out. Jason Tatum. That's why the Celtics are where they're at. Jason Tatum in Game 7. And all their other contributors, he stunk the rest of the games when Tobias was D'ing him up. Anyway, we'll see where they go from here. We'll see what Daryl Morey says during his press conference, and we'll continue this all. Appreciate you guys. You're the best. I'll talk to you on the next one.